Could you actually survive the 2009 game Left 4 Dead 2? Now, the term survive could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What I'll be searching for is a place you could call home, usually a room or camp-like area that would be a good potential place to live. It sounds harder than you might think. We have to take into account food, water, ammunition. What about defenses? Are those defenses man-made? Are they natural? And for the sake of today's video, I won't be including safe rooms because that'd be way too easy. Leave a like if you want more content like this from me, but let's begin. There are many areas in the game that come to mind, but my first potential candidate is on Dead Air's second map, and it's in the apartment building. You see, once you leave the safe room, if you jump over the fence to your left and climb up into the apartments using the nearby ladder, you'll eventually come across this very specific room right before the crane section. If you've played this map for any amount of time, you'll most likely have seen this area. The first thing I want to point your attention to are the 4 nearby windows that face the crane. 3 of them are boarded up, which certainly gives it some points. Outside, the player can find some gas cans which can be used as defense, but for a limited time. If you walk back into the apartment and you go to the front door, if you look to your right, you can actually see there are a bunch of items blocking the nearby hallway. There's some furniture and other machines grabbed from the nearby rooms. This is a great example of some defense, sectioning off flanking routes that infected could use against you. Going back into the apartment, there are 3 main rooms. The first is the main room, which is the kitchen/living area. The second is the bathroom, and the third is the bedroom. There is some trash on the floor that could be used as makeshift crafting, but it might just end up being junk. Taking a look at the kitchen reveals some promising utilities. There's a working microwave given that the timer is active, meaning that the room has access to power, but we already knew that because there's a lamp nearby that's on. Next to the microwave is a sink, which I assume has running water. Next to food, having access to water is by far the most important thing, so as long as the pipes work, you'll be good. Next to the sink lies a coffee machine, which may or may not have coffee in it already. If you could somehow get your hands on some coffee, you'd have a major advantage against other survivors. The caffeine would certainly give you more energy and you'd be able to stay up far longer than a lot of the other survivors, increasing your productivity. Below the coffee machine sits a mini fridge, which again I assume has power. This mini fridge next to the microwave is by far the 2 most important things, and we'll come back to them later. Entering the door to the bathroom, we can see that there's a toilet, there's a bath, there's a shower, there's even some towels, and there's even another sink. You'll even be able to clean yourself and take a dump if need be. Heading into the bedroom, there's really nothing here. I mean, there's 2 small side tables and there's some clothes on the floor, but that's about it. The windows inside the bedroom are very heavily boarded, which is definitely a plus. Inside the living room, there's some drawers which usually has a weapon spawn on it, so guns and ammo aren't really an issue. But there's still one major problem with this area. I mean, we have water, but what about food? We have a place to cook and store food, but what's a good source? Hear me out, alright? This is conspiracy cookie Blitz here, so you could resort to cannibalism, right? But if you weren't a carrier, you probably would get infected and the carriers would be good, but let's assume you aren't a carrier, this would be a horrible idea. The better option can actually be found nearby. If you backtrack to the first map near the greenhouse, there's a river where you could find some fish. I mean, you can always scavenge the nearby buildings, but if you want a really reliable food source, I'd bet on this river. However, this causes yet again another problem. It'd be extremely dangerous to backtrack every time you want a meal. But luckily for us, we have a mini fridge back home that could store some extra food. Ideally, you would come and fish about once or twice a week, making sure to catch extra so you could store it in your mini fridge. You could cook your fish using the microwave or one of the many fire barrels found nearby. The weapon in the apartment could certainly aid in defending you against the infected, and if it's a smaller caliber, you could also use it to fish. Might end up just exploding the fish if you're not careful, so be careful. Overall, this apartment would be a really good place to make a living. Good defense, access to food and water, there's even utilities, a place to cook and store food, a really well done area. This is a true 10 out of 10 spot. For the second place, I want to draw your attention to the junkyard on the first map of The Last Stand. Once you drop the container onto the fence, you make your way through some low cliffs and come across a crashed plane near a stream. Directly to your left, behind some trees, lies a small campground. The natural defenses in this area are pretty good. On 3 of the 4 sides of the camp, you're surrounded by high hills and thick forest, making being flanked by the infected pretty hard. However, on the one side that is open, you have pretty much no defense beyond what the forest provides. If you could somehow find an an axe or chopping tool, you could fortify this area by building up your own defense. The plane wreckage nearby could supply you with some scrap if you decide to go this fortification route. Heading back to the campsite, what do we actually have? Well, in the best case scenario, you can get a rocket launcher, an ammo pile, a med kit, and even a weapon spawn. I think it's fair to say you'll be able to defend yourself pretty well. So next to the only light source lies a sleeping bag which the player could use to sleep and get warm. There's also a put-out campfire which could be easily restarted by the nearby plane wreckage. If you really need the extra shelter, maybe from a rain or windstorm, you could hop into the nearby tent. So the defense is looking pretty good, but how do we get access to food and water? You might have noticed it on the way in, but there's a running stream which is a really good source of fresh water. This could be used as a food source if you get lucky enough to catch some fish. If you need some other supplies, there's some houses down the stream which I bet you could scavenge. One important thing I want to point out is that as you head down the stream, there's this little drop that you have to go down. This change in height won't kill you or anything, but it'll certainly make it harder for you to get back up to your campsite. If you don't end up finding any fish in this stream, you could try the river downstream, but once again, there's a giant height issue. Maybe if you could somehow construct like a 50-foot fishing rod. There's various cars in the village that you could try to repair and use, but if you're playing the long game, it might be more useful to turn them into scrap. The area's food and water is a lot more accessible than the last, but honestly, I see defense being your biggest problem. Yes, like I said earlier, you are protected by cliffs on 3 out of the 4 sides, but when you enter the junkyard earlier in the level, you find out very quickly how easy it is to get swarmed. So many zombies can just flood into the junkyard area, and not only that, the Last Stand is by far one of the hardest campaigns in Left 4 Dead, especially if you play on expert mode. So survival might not be that easy. It'll end up coming down to resource management and how well you end up defending your campsite. You might ask, why not just live in one of the nearby houses? And you certainly could, but in my opinion, you don't have as good natural defenses. The village is on a much flatter area and is surrounded by a lot shorter cliffs, meaning infected could potentially flood into your area a lot easier. I would personally go with the campsite and just try to keep a low profile. If you're a good shooter or a good defender, good fortifier, this is certainly the place for you. The third place took a lot of thinking, but I ended up on Miltown. If you need a reminder, it's that little town right as you start on hard rain. Seasoned Left 4 Dead players will know there are 2 versions of this map. There's a calm, sunny version of it, and then there's a dark, rainy version. So I have to take both of these maps into account. Since there are multiple houses in Miltown, your best bet is the one next to the one with the garage sale, not the actual house with the garage sale, but the one to the left. But keep that garage sale in mind because we'll come back to it later. Focusing on the daytime, let's talk about defenses. The ground the town is built on is pretty flat, so natural defenses won't really come into play until it rains. The house has these giant wooden supports that keep it off the ground for the most part. On one side of the house sits a big container full of cement, sand, and other junk. Some of it is piled on the ground and then other bits are scattered across the sidewalk. This big container could be used as an entrance to get on top of that house, however the infected probably will use it more than you will. Assuming we could somehow move that big container, you'd probably stand a better chance. The only other entry point to the house and that upper platform is the stairway. However, I have noticed during gameplay that infected are actually able to climb on top of the upper platform without needing the stairs. But by exploring the nearby houses, I'm sure you could find barbed wire or other supplies that you could use to barricade this upper area, forcing the staircase to be the only entrance. Assuming you were able to build a wall around the upper platform, you could use a car to try and block the staircase. You could also decide and go the makeshift route and make your own door. But by getting a car and edging it ever so closely up into that staircase, you could probably block your entrance if your walls are high enough. However, if your walls are too short, the infected might just climb on top of the car to get over your walls. But what about guns and ammunition? Well, remember that garage sale from earlier? Luckily for you, everything's free. Pick your fancy because you'll be shooting for days. It's also worth mentioning the nearby treehouse. If you need a quick escape or want to just get off the ground, this is a really good place to do that. I'm pretty sure there's always a hunting rifle spawn in this treehouse, so if you ever need any more weapons, there's an extra gun right there. I don't want to touch on this treehouse as it's not the main attraction, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Going back to the house, what's our food and water situation looking like? Well, the area is always rainy, so getting a container is going to be your best bet. Try to grab something like a barrel and you can put it outside to try and collect rainwater. If you're really good at crafting, you could get a tarp, put it over the barrel, cut a little hole, and you could have a bigger surface area to catch more rainwater. If you want to be extra safe, of course, you could always just get multiple containers, but it doesn't really matter as long as you end up catching a bunch of that rain. You could either put multiple containers outside or some near the back of the house or even on the roof if you have access. As for your food, you might struggle. I mean, you are in a town, so you could scavenge, and that's probably gonna be your best bet for the first couple of weeks. But once all your canned beans and corn run out, what are you gonna do? You see these potted plants? Well, what's in them doesn't look too edible, but take those out and replant something that is, and boom, there's a reliable food source. By searching the nearby sugar mill, I have no doubt you'll be able to find some sort of seed. But a really important question is, where are we going to store these plants? Because remember, they need a lot of water and sunlight. Well, in my eyes, you have two good options. The first is to cut a hole in your roof in one of the back rooms to allow sunlight and water in, making sure to either water the plants yourself when it's not raining or allowing the rain to do that for you. But the main point of cutting the hole is to allow that direct sunlight in. This might get really messy as now there's a giant hole in your roof that you can't really clean, and you're allowing a bunch of water and other things from the outside. Not to mention, this kind of compromises your defense if any of the infected get on your roof. But assuming the infected don't get on your roof, your food for the most part is pretty protected. You don't really have to risk leaving your humble abode because hey, your food is right there. More than likely, people won't want to make a giant hole in their roof, so the backyard is another great option too. You have great access to sunlight and the occasional rain, but no defenses at all. You have to leave your fortress in order to get access to your food, and the occasional infected might wander by and destroy your plants. On top of that, watering your plants every day could be a bit dangerous because you would have to leave your fortress, yet again, every day. Let's talk about when it begins to rain and flood. If you stationed your plants outside, they might get destroyed or drift away when the water rises. If you put your plants inside, you could have a huge problem with the excess water. By making a hole in a nearby wall or floor inside of the room where you keep your plants, you could vent out a lot of that water, but that's up to you. Visibility becomes a lot worse when it rains, so for the most part, you'll be restricted to staying inside the house. Luckily, the flooding isn't just a hindrance for you, but it acts as a natural defense, slowing any infected nearby. I know it doesn't really slow the infected in gameplay, but in reality, I like to believe it would. If you really need to go out, leave while it's raining heavily. The low visibility combined with the noise from the rain could obscure your movement and any noise you make, potentially making it easier to sneak around and scavenge. If the water level rises while you're outside, there's a nearby boat you could use to actually maneuver if you really needed, assuming it has gas. With the possible defenses you could make, all your guns, ammunition, food, and water, this place is looking pretty decent. If you were somehow trapped in Hard Rain's campaign, this would be a very good choice. I know none of these places are foolproof, like a tank could just bust through your wall, kill you, or a boomer explode near your camp, and then you have a huge problem. But I tried to look at these places from a more typical survival standpoint, and try to manipulate them to the best of my ability to the Left 4 Dead universe. I'm really curious, do you guys have any specific places that would fit this video? If you guys enjoy this video and just like it, please leave a like down below. If we hit 1,000 likes, I'll make another video like this, and at 1,000 likes, I'll also be posting some bunny pictures on my community tab. Inspiration from Any Austin for this style of video. I really enjoy his content, so please check him out down in the description below. I also had inspiration from a YouTuber 2O, which had this style of thumbnail that I really liked, so please check him out. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice rest of your day. Peace out.